What's up guys, it's me Lumos Theromax, and today I'm here to discuss a question that I get all the time in my comment section. Whatever happened to the emotional entities that the lanterns all derive their powers from? And obviously there's a pretty strict conclusion within the context of the main continuity, but I'm going to hit you guys with a theory at the end of this video to kind of potentially drive the point home that maybe everything's not exactly how it appears to be within the context of at least the main continuity DC multiverse. That being said, be sure to like and subscribe down low to both myself and all my other fellow Omni-Lanterns, because we have some awesome people hanging out in that crowd. And with no further ado, let's get to it. So today we're here to cover exactly what's going on with all the emotional entities that have existed whenever it comes to the emotional spectrum and what happened to them. So obviously, for everyone who's unclear, each emotion has an emotional entity that represents that concept, and those concepts, to tamper with them is to tamper with all of reality itself, which is rather significant, and this comes from some people who would definitely know. After all, tampering with a concept, it would make sense removing that concept or altering that concept would alter existence to reshape that concept. Now, that being said, you have a bunch of different ones. You have Ion, you have the Butcher, you have Parallax, you have Proselyte, you have Adara, you have the Predator, and then you have Ophidion. And each one of these represent the core emotional entities that exist. Oh, and of course, when you combine them all together, you get what we know as the Traveler. And the Traveler is essentially what represents the white, as opposed to all of the minor emotions that exist beneath it. And obviously within the context, Necron isn't a character who is associated with them, and like the Black Lanterns aren't necessarily associated with like the main spectrum by any means, more so representing like a fundamental opposite. All of these beings had been around for a pretty significant amount of time whenever it comes to the context of like DC, the Traveler being the first one to arrive inside our multiverse, and of course emotional concepts from the minor emotions were born as beings rose and began to feel those emotions, each one taking on the imagery of the first being who essentially felt that idea or that concept within our multiverse. So this is why they all have different forms, like bugs, whales, monsters, like all this different stuff going on. Now, obviously the most significantly consistently occurring one of these entities is Parallax. Big debut within the context of Emerald Twilight, where and of course the 2004-2005, where it's actually genuinely revealed to be a separate entity from Hal Jordan in general, because for about 10 years or so everyone genuinely believed that he was, like, Hal Jordan was Parallax, but we find out about these emotional concepts and these entities being entirely separate things, and it makes for a bunch of really interesting storytelling for quite some time, leading all the way into the New 52 run, and even towards, I'm not going to say the end, but about midway through that New 52 run, where we have a pretty significant event happen for not just the Lantern mythos, but for the emotional spectrum as a whole. Enter my boy Relic. And for those of you who don't know, I've actually got a video that's going to be coming out after my Red Lantern, Yellow Lantern Corps War coming up. But Relic was this really powerful villain who came from a prior universe before ours, and he actually has a bunch of theories about the emotional spectrum and all these different things going on. No other universe he had seen had contained beings like the emotional entities. And why is that significant? Because his universes or multiverses reservoir of emotional energy ran out, their source wall collapses, and everyone dies. Besides him, who gets trapped in a weird space-time aberration and winds up in ours. Now, he thinks that the emotional entities were actually a way to refill the reservoir, and as we see at the conclusion of that story, Kyle manages to take all the emotional entities, every single one of them, besides Parallax, which is important. Sinestro somehow managed to hide that from White Lantern Kyle Rayner wielding all of the other emotional entities, but we'll just skip over that because Sinestro is Chad. And he manages to take all of these entities, team up with Relic, and eventually slap Relic onto the wall, push through the wall with all the emotional entities, and deliver them to the emotional reservoir that exists beyond the source wall in the source itself. A wildly impressive feat, to be sure, because as you guys can tell, especially from this map, the source wall is literally the largest cosmological structure that contains our multiverse, or at least contained our multiverse at this specific point in time. Now, the really crazy part is that when Kyle comes back afterwards, after delivering those entities from there, despite being really messed up from his trip through the source wall and into the source to refill the reservoir, Kyle believes in that moment that the emotional entities are dead. They had sacrificed themselves to refill that massive emotional reservoir that existed out there. And even Relic, as he reappeared just before that, seems to confirm his ideas that the source was indeed past the source wall and emotional reservoirs were there, and Kyle refilled them. Now, in terms of the main universe, this is essentially what everybody believes from this point on as the most credible source of information that we currently had. Kyle Rayner is the White Lantern. Basically leaves it here. And there's a few things we need to cover past this, which I have on the channel a few different times in the past, that will help give you an idea of kind of what's going on with the emotional entities in the current moment. Now, obviously we have Parallax, as I had mentioned earlier, still roaming around, still viable, and Sinestro is actually the host of him for quite some time, and manages to lose him, and his whereabouts currently are a little bit weird in terms of what's going on with Parallax exactly. Hal Jordan clearly is becoming an entity kind of like Ion, though it's not entirely clear whether he is or not 100%. We have a Rage entity building up inside the center of Earth from the Green Lanterns run in Rebirth, if we'll ever manage to revisit that. And of course we have Black Hand rolling around as a entity representing the Black within the confines of our multiverse as well. But as far as we know, that's pretty much it. The entities are gone. I mean, who would know better other than Kyle Rayner? Kyle Rayner only went past the source wall one more time after that, and that was to completely wipe away Oblivion, this wildly powerful person who basically had White Lantern Kyle's powers and was like all the negativity born from him. But Kyle never really went back and revisited those things whatsoever. Now, this is where we're going to see me branch away from everyone else, and I'm going to hit you with the spiciest memes that you've never seen before. And of all places this would come from, I wish I was making this up, this is actually going to come from a Smallville comic book tie-in known as Smallville Lantern. And I'm going to make an argument basically saying Kyle Rayner was wrong. The entities actually did not get sacrificed, because in the 12th issue of this Smallville Lantern series, we essentially have, and I don't know why, because maybe these lanterns are just crazy OD, a bunch of lanterns literally holding open a portal to the source itself to bring in Parallax's one fear. What is his one fear? Ion. And in this portal itself, you can literally see all the other emotional entities back there directly in the source. So not only do they specifically say that there's a portal into the source itself, but you can see into it and see the other entities, implying that those entities still manage to exist inside the source itself. There's only one source like that, so there's no real way of getting around it. And the events of this comic take place well after the events of the entire series, where Kyle manages to drag Relic behind the source wall and into the source, aka like the New Guardians or the Relic event entirety known as Lights Out. So there you have it, the best, most solid theory you possibly can have on what's going on with the emotional entities in the current day, both the ones that are kind of being developed and created within the confines of our multiverse, and even the remnants of those who managed to survive out in the source itself, refilling that emotional reservoir that exists. Man, wouldn't it be cool one day if those beings decided to come back after refilling the reservoir, like to recharge? That'd be a pretty sick story to follow up on. Dawn of DC, hint hint, nudge nudge. But That being said, tell me what you guys think of my theory down low. It seems pretty solid, pretty case shut, but as always, I'm always interested in your guys' interpretations and ideas and thoughts on the matter, so be sure to comment down low and tell me what you think. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe, and hit up both the Omni-Lanterns down low and some of my other content. I've really been trying to produce a ton of content for you guys, and I know for all my hardcore Lantern fans out there, I'm trying to hit up a little bit more of that content for y'all because I know that's really what the majority of you guys want to see from me in the future. But as always, Lanterns, since this is everything I got, I guess I'll see you next time. Later.